Welcome to the Keystone Heights workshop. This is a workshop about food trucks in our community. And today is May 19th, 2025. Can I get a roll call?
Vice Mayor Cussler.
Here.
Councilman Welch.
Here.
Mayor Rodenroff.
Here.
Councilman Lewandowski.
Here.
Let the record show Councilman Knight is absent and will not make it.
Thank you. Alrighty. So first of all, we have 4 items on our agenda, and I guess Drew, do you want to just start, or how do you want to go?
That's perfectly fine with
Okay.
me, if you're okay with that. So, let me show you our agenda for tonight. So, can you guys see that? Okay. So we're gonna review the city of Keystone Heights current food truck ordinance, which you all have a copy, we're given a copy of or have it in front of you. And then we're gonna review other city and town ordinances such as Green Cove Springs, Orange Park, Palatka, and Gainesville. Then we're going to give you our city staff recommendations to the council, and then you, as the council, are going to form recommendations to send to planning and zoning as they form the ordinance. And then we're just going to have closing comments and questions. Okay? So, starting off, why we are here. Mobile food vendors' requests to serve our community have increased exponentially. We've increased interest by our citizens to have more food options available and more often. Therefore, we need to create an ordinance that addresses the current needs of our community. Some of the key focuses that I think we need to focus on is shifting approval from the council to city staff, ease of management and permitting processes, and streamlining process to better serve the community and the vendors. So then our city staff recommendations, based on what we need to focus on here. We have given you the current city of Keystone Heights, Green Cove Springs, Palatka, and the town of Orange Park, along with Gainesville. Stark, Florida does not have one. Middleburg is under the Clay County Township. So, or Clay County. So Green Cove Springs, as far as their mobile food vendor ordinance, which is the Division 3, and it's section 78, 120 is where that starts. That one seems to be the most comprehensive. A lot of the other food truck ordinances had a lot of the same similarities, but I felt like Green Cove really targeted 3 things well. One, it gave options for the application process. The first type is the individual vendor. So those that have the food truck would do an application. They would search out what property they would like to do this at. So it's on the vendor to link with a property owner and to apply for the application. The second one is a property owner or business. They would have one food truck. They would submit an application to have one food truck on their property. And then the type 3, they call it a special event. I don't know if we could do maybe a special event food truck. I don't want to confuse it with our special event that we already have, but that's where the property owner can have multiple vendors, okay? And that could possibly still go under the guise of a special event. We've done that with the food trucks with Mr. Butler. So management of this process can be handled with city staff. Particularly the permitting part of the process can be handled through a program we already have, a software called iWork, which we have just increased the ability of iWork to help us with being able to manage public works better. This is another option that we have for that. If we have it, we might as well use it, correct? So, do you have any questions on that? Okay. So workshop goals. We need to have your preferences in modeling the new mobile food vendor ordinance. Have you all had a chance to read over our ordinance and the ordinances that I provided you? So based on what you see here, what your recommendations are, if you want to model it after one of these or multiple of these, kind of piecemeal it together to fit our city, we need that. Recommended distance from a brick and mortar restaurant. Most of these are either 50 yards or 100 yards away from brick and mortar. One of the reasons why we need that recommendation is, for instance, there has been a request from a business owner in town. They had a parcel of property next to their business, They wanted to have that there. If we did 100 feet, they would not be able to do that because there's a restaurant that's coming into that area. If it's 50 feet, they still can. And so that could bring another option. So keeping those things in mind with the town, with the spacing of everything that we have and the ability for lots, what does that look like? The other is the size of the area for one food truck versus the size of the area that would house more than one food truck. And there are rules in place that the planning and zoning will have to look at. Fire codes, 50 feet away from this and 50 from that, just like I do for special events. But those guidelines will be very helpful for planning and zoning because they don't want to come back with something you're like, no, that's not what I want. Those parameters would be very, very helpful. So this is the part where you guys get to talk a little bit about that. That's just my 2 cents on what we definitely need to give to planning and zoning. And of course, you guys are aware. Rich, do you want to tell them how many readings they need to be able, once it goes, what the process is from this to planning and zoning to back to them so they understand?
So planning and zoning should solicit public comment as far as depending on what direction you give them, and then hopefully planning and zoning would come to specific language which would come back for your consideration, and you would have 2 hearings. I'm sorry, 2 public hearings.
That's standard for any ordinance.
Correct.
Okay, so the last one was planning and zoning, you will come back with, you said 2 recommendations?
No, 1 recommendation, and then that proposed ordinance will be considered by you as the city council in 2 public hearings.
Okay.
So you'll have, it's called first reading, you'll have the first reading where we read the title, the actual full text of the ordinance is published. People have the right and ability to come and look at it, and then at your next meeting, you'll have final reading and adoption. Again, we'll have another public hearing where anyone from the public can come and speak. And, I mean, people don't have to, but I imagine you may get some comments at one of those public hearings from your local business.
Do those public hearings occur in the context of the city council
Yes.
meeting, or, okay?
Yeah, generally, you'll see, at least our agendas used to have resolutions and ordinances as one of the first proclamations, resolutions, and ordinances were the first parts of the meeting. So that if anybody did want to come speak with them, we can kind of get them the ability to speak and then let them meet.
Perfect, thank you, Rich.
Y'all have any questions or comments?
Are we mostly concerned with planning and zoning, spacing, numbers of trucks and things like that?
What's
Or
that?
are we also concerned here with operating and safety requirements?
It's up to you. So
Okay.
understand that your authority is essentially what's referred to in the municipalities as a police power. So
Okay.
your police power is geared towards public safety, health, and well-being. So those are the things you're working on. So if you allow multiple food trucks on one property, or you're gonna have a problem with parking, slowing down traffic, people crossing the street, things like that.
Okay, thanks.
And if you would like, I mean, after y'all get done with your comments, we can walk through whatever ones of these you like, or I could walk through and tell you why I liked Green Cove Springs, because they did target exactly all those things, and we could tweak what those are. Did you have something to say, Mr. Robitusky?
So the way I look at it is in 2 perspectives. One is, what have we had complaints about? You know, what have people said we could do better? And then, what are the basic tasks that we have to cover? And I've come up with 1, 2, 3, 4 main tasks and subtasks under that. So the first one, and these are not in any particular order, but is the allowed locations. Where are we gonna say this is allowed? And in my mind, it could be close to the location of a restaurant if it plans to operate when the restaurant is closed. So there's a nuance here. If a local restaurant's open, then they can't do it there. Because we need to protect our local businesses. We can't have food trucks coming in from anywhere and hurting our local businesses.
And Councilman?
Yes?
So that, what you just described was a lot of what the public comment was the first time we enacted the mobile vending ordinance. The concern was that a food truck vendor that does not have to undergo the same Department of Health, the same permit regulations, could come in and because they don't have the same requirements, at a lower cost, essentially put a brick and mortar business out of business. I gotta tell you, that was the undercurrent in many places around this area, many municipalities. You saw Jack's Beach, Neptune Beach, Atlantic Beach, all dealing with a lot of those same issues. As time has moved on, I don't know if that actually came to fruition. I haven't seen a food truck, in fact, you see a number of food truck vendors that become so successful that they open up brick and mortar businesses.
The second issue is frequency. So Green Coast Springs charges basically $100 for a year. And that means if you come once, it's $100. If you come 20 times, it's $100. So what is the frequency and how does that, or is that at all affected by the cost, the permit that we allow them to have it? And, are we gonna let someone come 50 times in a year, once every week for all practical purposes, or not? Are we gonna limit it? Or do we let them come in as often as they want, but then when others want to come in to make it more fair, then we limit the first one who's been doing it every single week? That is an issue that we need to discuss. The third thing is the approval process. And this has been a difficulty of ours because the council has approved it. We have to have the insurance, we have to have the dates, and we've had, according to our ordinance, we're very limited to what they can do. And we want to, as Ms. Bell pointed out, we want to really let the city take care of that. We don't want to do that anymore because we don't want a vendor to have to wait potentially 6 or 7 weeks before they're approved. And lastly is what is the cost that we will charge for them to come and do this?
Talking about the permit fee.
Right, the permit fee, yeah.
What is the purpose of the permit fee? Does it offset some administrative cost that the city incurs for
Basically.
reviewing that? Okay.
Right, and Green Cove Springs had an interesting part in that. If you renewed your paperwork and there was nothing changed, that the fee would actually be less the second when you renew, because there's less work at park, so yes.
Okay.
Let me add to that. So it should also be if there's anticipated cost of insurance compliance.
Right.
Yeah, well, part of the approval process, I had 3 things I wrote down, was ensuring that they have insurance, was the duration, how long was our permit gonna be good for? Is it gonna be good for 1 month, 6 months, a year? And then, what kind of inspections are necessary? Do we have to do the inspections? Do they have to show us that they have been inspected? That kind of a thing, and so we put that in the ordinance. And I would hope it'd be that they get inspected, as we can see that. But we have to put that in.
Should it be on display on
There should be some sort of a permit on their vehicle, I would think.
Well, certainly when they
Through the
apply.
state,
There-
Well, I'm
for
just
the
saying
state.
that-
There is through the state, they have
State.
liability insurance they would have to have, and they would have to have their state licensure as well. And that has to be, they have a number on their food truck at a couple different places, and that has to match their paperwork.
Well, I'm talking about inspections,
No,
because,
they're-
like, I'll never forget, and I'll probably never go there again, but the Sonic in Palaca was shut down because of rat turds in the kitchen. Okay? And I don't think I'll ever eat there again. All right?
I may have just convinced a number of other people.
That's a hard visual to
Julie,
get rid
make sure you get that in the minutes.
So, that kind of stuff I wanna know about.
Right.
And so how do we?
But we're not, let's be careful. I agree with everything you're saying, but let's be careful. We are not gonna become the Department of Health. We're not.
No,
gonna
no,
become
no, no.
professionals.
I just wanna know about
I
it.
mean, that's part of
So-
why the permit that they have through the state ensures
Mhm.
that situation
Right.
for us. I mean, there's probably some number that you take when they apply for our process.
Mhm.
And you could always have it checked up on and things like that.
Right.
But we do not want to be like a health inspector.
Oh, no.
No.
We don't have the authority.
We
to do
can't.
that.
No.
The expertise.
Right.
Don't restaurants and I presume our trucks, they're required to display some
Yeah.
stamp or certificate that they passed
Yes.
and so on?
Well, not from us. I mean,
I understand, no, from whatever authority we wanna cite.
Yeah, I think there's a department health certificate they have to put up,
Yes.
As part of their
Pretty good one.
operations.
It outlines that in our.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And I think that Councilman Lewandowski, that the reason why I liked Green Cove Springs so much is because I think it's gonna answer a lot of those questions, but might not be particularly how we want it, but it could be a good guideline and a starting point to see, okay, that checks that box, but we wanna modify it this way.
Placeholder.
That checks this box, but I think that that doesn't necessarily apply here and there. I just thought it was a good place to start.
I agree, and I think our goal, this would be my goal, is to give the general direction. We would like these certain things to happen, you know, a streamlined process, so 2 weeks to me kind of seems, we shouldn't make them wait, but we shouldn't, they should not
Usually longer
expect
than 2
you to drop everything and do their approval permit right now.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
it's gotta be a both two-way street there. And if we give you that kind of guidance, you know, then go, we don't micromanage it, go rewrite it, then bring it back to us, and I think we'll look at it and say, okay, yeah, or, that's not exactly what I meant. And the planning and zoning board needs that guidance from us.
Steve, do you have anything to
I
add?
agree the same thing, is let them have the approval for it. And I don't, seems like up now for, I don't like to, you apply once and then good for all year.
Yeah.
I think it should be just, you apply, you have your truck, you do it, then you apply again the other week you want to do it.
I think the difference is what you're thinking of and what this is actually doing is this is a year-long process, but we are not regulating them, scheduling them. They are picking a property that is either owned by someone, we could put a limitation on that, or they're picking a business that they're working out in front of. And then there's a process that we set by the ordinance, by whatever is decided, that we say, okay, if we say they can go once a month, twice a month, but they're basically, we're not having them, of course, at the beach anymore, so then they're picking another place, another opportunity to build business too. So this is not so much we're telling them the area that is allowed, but we're not limiting to what business or what property they're working on, unless you put that clarification on there.
Well, and these are sophisticated businesses, so
Yes.
I'm not weighing in on what I think should happen, I'll just tell you that you'll see when you have a process in place, there will be some very successful food truck vendors that will come in and they'll want to apply for a year in advance and they'll try to squeeze out everyone else so that they have the permit. So analysis of some type of priority or fairness, I think is something that you may want to take a look at.
Right. I agree. I don't know exactly how perfectly this is going to work. I have reached out to Green Cove and we can always, use them as a resource. They're a sister city and they can tell us what's working, what's not. I do
I have
think
a
that.
question for Rich.
Sure.
Does that analysis that you mentioned, Rich, does that need to be spelled out in the
In the code,
or can that be at the discretion of the council?
so when you get to at the discretion of the council, candidly, it backs you into a corner. And it
Okay.
I can just tell you, in the future, it's gonna create problems where you'll be accused of favoritism of one company over another.
Okay.
But you know, maybe there's a limitation where they can only operate 2 times a month, or, first come, first serve. I mean, there's
Okay.
different ways that you can
That is,
objectively
gotcha.
kind of create a fair
Maybe
standard.
no more than 2 times per month,
Or whatever.
unless, you know, nobody else wants it and the council says, or the city says, okay. Nobody else wants the 3rd weekend.
Right, but see, keep in mind, but what I'm thinking here with this Green Cove one is they are not gonna be, we're not scheduling how often they're staying on our personal property. That is an agreement, we put those limitations of one food truck can only be in one area for so many periods of time. There are examples here of that. But they are going to be, for instance, don't yell at me, Ace Hardware, but Ace Hardware, if they wanted to have a portion of their parking lot for a sandwich truck, they could apply for this as a business, or the vendor can apply with this, putting Ace Hardware down there. And then the Ace Hardware, they can say, well, this is for 6, you know, within the ordinance, we've limited it to 6 or once a month. That's what that permit would be for one food truck for either applied for by a vendor or by a business. Okay? It's ultimately a partnership between them, but based on the ordinances that is
So what-
created,
Because
correct?
it's city
What
limits.
Drew's describing is, imagine this, imagine you have a brick and mortar, and a restaurant comes in, and essentially they pay for their business tax receipt. I mean, that's the same type of permission process. You're permitting someone to operate within the boundaries of the city limit. Where they lease their restaurant is really kind of not our problem. So Drew's talking about the permit process, that we're trying to make sure that people are safe. We don't want to have too many food
Right.
trucks in one area. You may want to look at hours so that they're not
Right.
running food truck at 2 a.m., things like that.
And all that is covered by this. The
Yeah.
secondary one is, the first one is a vendor applying, the second one is a business applying, and you can set the parameters. You can say the businesses can't just apply, they have to say who they're gonna have come in, but I don't know if you should manage that much, because they can say, I want one food truck once a month, or whatever the ordinance is, and they apply for it. The third one is a special event food request, is what they have here, where one person can organize a food truck event. But then it would be based on the parameters of what space is in the ordinance and how far it is from brick and mortar, but a person can come in and run a food truck event outside of the city events. You see what I'm saying? So that gives 3 different parameters, but none of them are we managing the place where they're doing. We're just approving that, make sure that it follows the ordinance upon first application. That it's, you know, it's number of times that they have their licensure, that they have their liability insurance, that they are not on a sidewalk, that they're not on a culvert, that they're not blocking the visibility of the roadways, and that's what's covered by all of the parameters in the Green Code. They go thoroughly through that to make sure that everything's safety wise and honoring other businesses and making sure that, you know, it's safety is first. Is all in there, and it gives 3 different, like I said, 3 different avenues: multiple food trucks by one business or property owner, 1 food truck for a business or property owner, and then a vendor applying. And then we're not necessarily regulating, we're making sure the permit is good, and of course it does in here say that if there was a violation, like they're breaking it, then that's when code enforcement might have to come in.
By food truck event, you mean a collection of food trucks, like an outdoor mall, everybody come to this parking lot?
So once
for-
upon a time, I think it was
Pardon?
once upon a time prior before you were here, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, they had a food truck event. Gentleman did a special event request, and they had multiple food trucks. He ran the food trucks, he organized the food trucks, and he had an agreement with the council. They approved him to come on Fridays.
So he's in the position of being the sponsor as it's defined in
Right.
what I read.
Right, but that was here at the Keystone Beach. They would have to provide a lot based on the ordinance, based on the size that you set for a multiple food truck event.
Yeah, but under our current ordinance, they didn't have to do much of anything.
No, it was
Because
us.
It was considered a city-sponsored event, so it was once a month.
That's one thing I wanted to ask about, if we're talking about an art fair, for example, and.
That doesn't
food-
apply to this. That would be running under just events. It's a
Sorry?
whole, there's
That's
an
our
ordinance, just
normal-
normal events.
We have a normal special event request.
Okay.
It would fall under that.
But I think what you may be getting to is that what if food trucks are at that normal event?
Bingo.
Right.
Well, so
The
when you
same,
do, yeah,
I'm sorry, the same space restrictions and so on.
Yes, there are some space restrictions. There's fire marshal codes. You have to be so far away. You can't have a vehicle attached to a trailer.
Bingo,
You
yeah,
have to
yes.
have, if you have sprinkler systems inside, there are all of those codes as well. And so that planning and zoning would have to look at that if they had multiple events. But then at the same time, you could put in there, you know, like they do in Green Code, where you say all the regulating bodies have to.
yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having, zone-specific guidelines. It helps
Right.
in our
And
office
Palaca
here,
did that very
when
much.
someone applies,
Right.
and it's 3 buckets, and which bucket they're in, you all pull that trigger, you decide what that is. I like the idea of them not being able to do, like, so they can take it over. So you say, let's say that vendor can come here 4 times a year within their 1-year permit, whatever. Y'all are able to track that with iWorks. I like the idea that we are not involved at all in the approvals. It adds at least another 4 weeks or more to the request from the time they ask. It makes us appear to not be easy to work with. Plus, I just think it's a much more streamlined process, it sounds like. The other thing is, I like the zoning idea. I want you to see this internal process streamlined for permits and scheduling. Just like, you know, you're involved with the scheduling. The idea with events on public and our properties, for example, I know there's rules about how big a food truck space is. The average size of them is around 210 square feet. The bigger ones are around 22 feet long or 300 and, let's see, I looked it up today, 308 square feet. So I guess the one thing that I really, really hate, and this probably is a zoning question, is that we're only allowed to have one truck based on the riding per acre.
That, the current ordinance, but we're looking to modify that.
I know,
So-
that's what I'm saying, so that's
Right,
43,000 square feet for one 200 square foot vehicle.
But there were a number of restrictions, and keep in mind that the prior council that passed this ordinance was really trying to dissuade food trucks from coming. So they
Correct.
weren't inviting them back.
You're correct.
So the 1 acre requirement was a problem. The fact that they couldn't sell, that essentially, that whoever sponsored the event had to essentially pay for all the food and whatever they were selling,
Mhm.
was another way that they tried to discourage. So the only way you could really have food trucks within the city was it had to be a city sponsored.
And so we're bypassing all of that. We're also streamlining the amount of time that staff is spending on it. We're looking to, we're making sure everybody's safe, we're making sure all the guidelines are done, and we're giving 3 different options for that on top of our events that we have food trucks as well. That doesn't limit the ability for future endeavors that we may say, you know, where we have food trucks come out for a food truck event, that would be on top of. This is just allowing.
We would change that, I mean, as part of this process.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so, and I'm just thinking about where our city limits are.
Yes, ma'am.
So you have Ace Hardware, because they have a parking lot, right? You only get one food truck there, they have a separate way that they have to.
Are they even in the city limits?
They are in the
They
city
are,
limits.
Yeah,
yes,
they
sir.
are. Okay.
But,
That's
you know,
why-
we have very, very few opportunities for that. We have no room downtown for anything like that. So it comes down to the parking,
Well,
which we don't
Yeah,
wanna do
it
that
could,
anymore.
but churches could easily,
Well, churches that are.
churches in
so
the
those
city
are like
limits
in
could
that
open
bucket.
up, and that could be, you know, they could say, hey, listen, we're wanting to partner with, you know, a couple food trucks. They could do that easily. Also, Ace Hardware, you know, might wanna do it during the day, but they maybe wanna do it at night.
Yeah.
So there,
So I
it does
remember seeing
open it up
Temple.
more. I was concerned about finding another place without the park, or the beach, because there was really, within the current guidelines,
Yeah.
very few places. This opens up, like you said, if it, you know, you could do 50 feet, you could do 100 feet, but maybe if that business is closed, then that's part of the ordinance. Or maybe they're using facilities that it benefits the community. And I don't know if churches would wanna do that. That
I
might
mean,
have
I sit
liability
and
with
think
the parking lot.
about
I
the
don't know.
churches that are in town, and even Ace, there's no restaurants anywhere near those places that are 50 even, they're further than 100 feet. I don't think we're gonna have that challenge, it doesn't seem like. But, what I do think about though, is the food trucks that wanna come here and be in our park, that we own. And we don't wanna have them over there anymore. And I know we talked about the park across the street. as
Now it's
being
gonna take a little
property.
time, but that's possible.
Correct. And to me, that's probably the main area that we're gonna see food trucks most likely in this town, unless they are like at Ace or one
I
of the
think
churches.
this opens them up. The main goal was right, to be able to serve the community, give them more options.
Right.
To streamline the process, to allow, to take away a lot of the responsibility of governing.
Mhm.
I think this kind of setup gives us that one first step to being able to allow those things. You know, our community gets more options, our vendors have more opportunities. And then we have the ability to look at the other options so we're not making them wait again for
Right.
progress.
You wanna
Progress will
keep
still
sending them
happen.
away
Yes.
while we're trying to figure it out.
And we're not hurting our people who are renting the pavilion, but also the people that are enjoying our park.
Correct.
They're not limited in being able to park there.
Well, it's giving you guys a lot more flexibility, because you have a designated space for food trucks now if they wanna come on our property. Cause at the park, you had to figure out, was somebody gonna have a.
But you're talking about for the natural park.
Yeah, I'm talking about across the street, yes. So the thing is, you have now that designated space that you can place the food trucks.
Right, but that would be more of a special event situation.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it may be.
Park has weird conditions about us making money on
But
Right.
we had that conversation
Yeah.
though with Ms. Fleet.
There are ways to do that. There's things that we need to do before we can even delve into that. But that is a possibility, but it's not a now, and we're looking at a now. That's why I really did recommend looking, at all the different things that this Green Cove Springs set forth, and maybe looking at piece by piece and seeing if we want to give recommendations to planning and zoning, so we could come up with a food truck ordinance that allows a permitting process that the staff can do, so we can bring more businesses in and allow for, more opportunities for our community to have options with food trucks while still honoring the businesses that we already have. It's not perfect, it's not the end all be all, but I think that, along with an increase in festivals, along with the looking into other areas that we can use for food trucks, I think that will exponentially cover the concerns that we have here.
Well, I
But
think that,
sometimes what helps is if you take that Green Cove ordinance, if that's what you wanna use as a starting point, start deleting things that you think don't apply. Don't worry about anything else. Just get rid of stuff that you're like, well, that really doesn't fit us.
yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear cut, I thought, for the most part. But I think equally important is definitely the location, because if we're moving away from beach, and now they're talking about what's happening here in the next month with the water,
Right.
we're not gonna have any room over there for any food trucks. And we don't wanna turn them away. So we have got to have a definite plan A and plan B for the trucks to be looked at as soon as possible. Hi Evan, how are you tonight?
Doing good.
Thanks for being here.
So I think Bo helped me out, the planning and zoning meeting would be June 16th. Is that about when we're trying to get them in here?
Yes, that's correct.
So we're still 3-4 weeks away from even getting them to look at it. I don't.
But I think giving them clear parameters would help
Yeah,
the
yeah,
process.
I do, and I would offer this for your consideration, Madam Mayor. And this is just from watching kids get run over. I've seen more of that than I care to, and soldiers and everything else. The very safest place to put a food truck in the city of Keystone is in that beach parking lot in the late fall, winter, early spring months. Because the food trucks there, they don't move all day. People come in, they park in the parking lot, they get out, they order Chick-fil-A. I mean, there was just no issue today. But school's still in.
And fewer people are.
Every Saturday and Sunday I've been by here for the last month, that thing's parked. So if you would consider allowing us a little flexibility in the language, I don't know if it's like May through Labor Day, we don't have any food trucks in there, but like on a Tuesday in November, nobody's like jetting across the street here to get over there and getting hit. We can always do things to mitigate risk, but just saying we would never use that parking lot, I don't know that we need to say that, but I totally get, we want that parking for the beach park when people are gonna use the beach park, which
Lately
is
it's
all
not.
summer long. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, the other idea, I mean, Wendy and I talked about this, was right outside here to the left of our building. Because you can't put very many there, but you could put a couple of them there, until we could decide what we could do across the street.
Right, and there's other
Where
parts
the
too,
two
you have
signs-
Sunrise Park, I know it's further away from the middle of the
That's
city.
too far.
I know, but there's more options out there. It may be too far, but if people know and we have events out there, that could possibly.
Well,
be-
yeah. I mean,
The
we,
school could have
it-
an event too.
Right.
yeah. I feel like the most I'm thinking about being the owner of the food truck, where am I gonna get the most traffic? And it's not gonna be out of Sunrise, I don't think. And we have a big
It's
event
not,
out there.
that's why I think that partnering with a business that already has it or has a lot already would be very, very beneficial.
It's just crowded over here.
What Drew said before, let them figure that out, because you know what, it's weird, some of these food trucks have cult followings where
Yeah, they do.
they put it out on social media
You're
where
right.
they're gonna be, and people track them down, so maybe
Right.
Sunrise wouldn't be a problem for them.
We could always give the option, or if you could open that up for that. I know that there's a lot of people that are gonna potentially come in the future to want to, do special event requests and different parks, and that's a possibility where they're running it and we're providing support, which gives one more opportunity. I think what we're looking for today is not worrying about where we're gonna put food trucks right now. What we're looking for with this ordinance is allowing food trucks to be able to find options in the city without being limited, but that we are making sure that they're safe and that.
Safety rules is what we're looking to you for.
So-
Sorry, Rich.
Safety rules is what we're looking to you for.
Okay.
So I think I'd like to refer you to, the page 2 of Green Cove Springs. I think it's page 2, give me just a second. Let me correct that, let's move to page 3, where it says restrictions. I think that's gonna answer some of what Councilman Lewandowski and the mayor are looking at here. So the mobile food vendors are subject to the following restrictions. Here they have 50 feet. That's one of the parameters that I think you could give as guidance to planning and zoning, and they may be able to come back with more clear understanding of that by looking at all the different businesses and seeing. But I think 50 might be more helpful. Within 50 feet of a mobile vendor, another mobile vendor, that has to deal with a nod to the fire codes. Within a required site visibility triangle at an intersection of a driveway, an alleyway, public street, another public street, as set forth in
I
a
don't
certain
think you
section.
need to read all of it to
No,
us.
that's fine, but I'm just saying, that I'm just reading 2 more. So then you have 15 feet of a unity box or fire hydrant, or utility box, I'd like to be able to read. And then within any area that impedes, endangers, or interferes. It goes on in section 2, the hours of operation, as Rich was indicating. You need to set that. Exemptions on street parking and where you're gonna sit people, if they're gonna sit outside. The mobile food vending vehicles and any assorted outdoor seating is what it says. Signage, so that's also, so it doesn't impede visibility of pedestrians and or cars. And then mobile food vendor is responsible for the disposal of waste. Moving forward, it goes into how to use that public space and what regulations within sidewalks and the streets and other public spaces. It gives exceptions for outdoor seating. Again, safety guidelines, particularly with national fire prevention. Mobile food vendor must adhere to state licensures, that's what we were talking about. Mobile food vendors must clearly display all required state and city license and permits. And then food vendor must also not transfer ownership of permit, which I think is crucial, because you don't want them just flipping it over so you haven't regulated the people that are there. Then it talks about practices in 126, which again talks about the zoning exemptions. There may be an area that you don't want to have them in. It talks about the operation of an abandoned business in an abandoned business location. You're limiting that. They can't just be in front of an abandoned business without the owner's approval.
Okay.
Fail to display proof of licensure. These are the things that could possibly get them to break the contract. Am I reading that correctly, Rich? So this is our out. If someone is blatantly breaking these rules, this is where, that's the breach of contract thing, where we can say, I'm sorry, that's not gonna work out anymore.
And some places actually give your city manager the authority to revoke the permit if there's a violation
Right.
of the condition.
And where Green Cove has a whole department and we don't have that size, you could easily say in lieu of that, the city manager or designee to review these. On 127, it talks about insurance and indemnities, so we'll not go through all that. But if you look at the Green Cove application, I included that because I think it breaks it down a little clearer, so you can see, if you're a visual person like I am, the different types of applications, what we're asking them for, where the location is, the distance. We're checking off all these boxes from our standpoint, ensuring safety, ensuring the, all that, and then of course we have the insurance requirements, the review of information and fees. One of the things Green Cove does is that if you come in the middle of the year, you're not paying the full application fee, you're only paying half of it. That could be a possibility as well, where you say, if you only want to do 6 months, so it's a small business startup, they don't want to do $100, they can do it 6 months at a time. It's more cost on us to do that if you do it.
What do we charge right now? 50
For
a food truck?
For food trucks for a vendor
For a
event,
vendor, for an
$50.
event? 50?
Yes, ma'am. And when they're doing the special event, we're not charging them anything right now. So, They're just doing a special event request and they're making all the profit.
Special events such as,
So what we've been using in lieu, because we had food trucks that when we all started here a year ago that were showing up, we were like, we really need to have some kind of consistency.
sure,
So we started doing a special event request because that's the best we had. Because it wasn't an event I was throwing, so it didn't fall under that, so it fell under a special event, and that's why the council had to approve it.
special event like the,
Like with Chick-fil-A, Rollersons, in order for those food trucks to come in, they would fill in an application, it would go in front of the council, they show their liability insurance, they show their licensure for the state, and then we would take it to, once it was approved, then we would tell them they're approved, and then we had to, because the only place that was within an acre
yeah,
was the
Understand.
beach, and then we had to coordinate that with the rentals.
okay. So it's a special event just because we have
It-
Chick-fil-A there?
No, it was called a special event because we had nothing else to put it on.
Okay. When I think of special event, I think of like
Yes.
tournament that was just canceled and,
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
the
That's a
Yes.
big
tennis
one.
tournament or whatever.
We used to do smaller ones, like we would do the farmer's market, that was considered a special event.
Okay,
So it was just a way to review, are you gonna cause problems for parking, traffic, safety?
sure, I just wanna be sure I understood what a special event is.
Right. And part of Green Coast Springs does have a special event that's a multiple food truck, and we would have to look at the wording for that.
Yeah,
Because it could be mobile food vendor special event versus a special event, because we did one in the fall for, my nutrition retreat. In that lot, they did a fall festival.
okay. The operating hours, 7 AM to 10 PM.
I've seen 7 AM to 10 PM, I've seen 6 AM to 10 PM.
I saw that too.
I've seen much later, like 8 to whatever.
Well, I was wondering.
I think that they're parked there and they're food prepping, not every vendor opens at those hours.
Right,
And then they have to close down, and I think that's more of the long lines. I mean, they may serve till 10, but I think that's what they were looking
I think
at.
that's a good general guide. I wondered about an exception if a special event, a concert is scheduled to go until 11.
Well, that would be under the guise of an event that I'm doing, or it would be a special event application on top of a special food vendor event application. If someone outside of the city staff is doing it, there could be a way where they say, council, we'd like to do a special event, and then along with that, we wanna have, multiple food trucks. They could possibly do that. There's a way.
Okay.
But
So that exception is covered
events
already,
like
or-
that would fall underneath my coordination. If
Okay.
I have a festival with food trucks, otherwise it would fall under a special event that someone else is running it, we're providing support. At least that's the way I see it, is that true?
Okay.
There's two things I'd just like to bring up and share. One is, Spring Flames we used to do in the past, right here,
Yes.
and we used the employee parking lot as the food truck alley. And so we've done that before. That was kind of what you were just suggesting 10 minutes ago, I think. So that has been done. So,
Yeah, I'm talking about the yard where the marquee sign is, right here, right in front of where we park, they park here on the back of the building.
yeah, they left that for vendors. They put up their tents and that kind of stuff.
Right.
The second thing I wanted to ask was, the women's club puts on in the fall a very nice bazaar.
Yeah, spring, fall bazaar.
Yeah, and they have food trucks out there.
Yes.
So my question is, that's on county.
Yes.
What are the county rules? I appreciate you getting all these others, but I'd like to know what the Clay County rules are.
The county rules, they're very similar to what you see here, except for, when you're outside the city limits, that's the county rules, like you said, with
Well,
women's
yeah.
clubs, so they have to have, fire marshal has to inspect them. They don't necessarily have to do that with me, I still follow the same guidelines.
I don't need you to tell me right now, I'd just like to see them.
Okay, well,
You know what I mean?
they're on Unicode and we can print those out for you, you just go to Clay County Unicode, right?
Okay.
And you can pull those up at any point in time, you can pull up Clay County Unicode and put in mobile food vendor, but I can get you a copy of that.
You want us to just print you a copy of it?
We can print it right now if you want.
So half this is on the fly here. I read it and I didn't think about half the stuff I'm thinking about now when I read it, So, what I want to say is I appreciate all the work you've done.
Right,
But I think this is something that we should also consider is what is the Clay County rules? We're part of Clay County.
no, they are, and so I can have that printed for you easily, and you can look at it, what you will see is a lot of mirroring here in all of the Clay County options that we've given you are very similar because they are following underneath the Clay County ordinances as well. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But there's just specific to, Green Cove is specific to their, you know, there are certain things. Gainesville, of course, totally different animal, but Gainesville has certain zones that they allow them. This Green Cove allows residents to be able to have food trucks at their house.
Because we're a home rule state, our city ordinances trump county ordinances
In our 1.2, yes.
in our city limits.
And within our geography, yes.
Right.
Well, it's not that they trump, the counties doesn't apply when we have.
Right.
I'll let y'all talk for a second.
But at the same time, I don't think we should be, way off from what the county does. And since I've seen them at the, Women's Fall Bazaar, I think we should try to do something similar.
Well, even when, you say Green Cove, they have their big events out down there on the river, right?
Right.
And go look at their food trucks, literally bumper to bumper to bumper.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's crazy how many they are able, and so we've got Green Coves, the way they are set up as well.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing for us is, you know, just like you said, these are kind of outdated because that wasn't a need years ago. And what we're just trying to do is ever how many we can put, our biggest challenge is space, where are we gonna put them? Then I think it does help us in our minds think about how they're gonna be laid out, especially if it's something that they wanna come and be on city property. If it's a business owner or something, that's probably a little more cut and dry to me based on these references that Drew created for us. But I think once we kind of know, since we're not gonna use the park, what can we use? And how soon can we use it? Because we got several big things coming up, you know? And I got a feeling it has to be a nightmare. I'm trying to plan even to put someone in that park over there when there's an event going on inside the pavilion. Just so if those people don't want other vehicles in the parking lot, for example. So
We do ask, if someone comes in and they want to rent the pavilion, and say the staff ask the person coming in to rent the pavilion, say Chick-fil-A is in the parking lot, we let them know that they are there,
yeah,
so they can make a decision.
right.
If they already have rented, say on the weekend, we don't allow the food trucks to come in.
Right. So see, that hurts those vendors, because, you know, that's like the time that they can have most of their business
Right.
is on the weekends. And I don't want that to be a problem. I want to have a space that's dedicated for them, through us, that we can control ever how many we want to put in there with the distance apart, that's not 1 on 1 acre. You know, to get with today's needs. And it's gotta be, to me, convenient to this beach area. I mean, I understand the idea of Sunrise, but that's gonna be capturing people coming up and down 100 for the most part. And, you know, they do, some of them have followings and stuff, and I'm saying above and beyond a, you know, like a spring thing or whatever happening. I'm just talking about every week. I know I hear where they see Chick-fil-A over there, and I love having Chick-fil-A here too, but they're here just about every month.
But you're talking about a different scenario. This is regulations for when people come in. You're talking about actually leasing space to food truck or group of food trucks. So I think that may be different only because you have to be careful about not using public dollars for private benefit, where you're subsidizing essentially.
So when we put them over at the park, that's on our property.
Right.
And we don't wanna do that anymore, because with the water coming back, the parking lot's packed right now, with exception of maybe winter dates like you mentioned. I want to have a space that we can place them on our property that's no different than the park property, where they have to go through the same process as anybody else. But we have a known space or a zone that they can go to and set up, ever how many we decide, minimal versus max, that can fit in that space. And I don't know where that space is. Like, we can't use the park across the street. It's gonna take us a year to get that figured out. That's not an ideal situation.
But so you need to have regulations first, and then figuring out where the space you want to apply it is, I think is the same.
I understand, you know, that, and that looks pretty cut and dry to me tonight. Just looking at these 4 other cities and, you know, I mean, I'm not a fan of recreating the wheel. I think that most of this stuff is pretty direct or straightforward. And with some minor changes, I think we'll be pretty close to coming up with this very soon. But, you know, if we gotta wait till June 10th, you said, for them to get together, or June, did you say maybe June?
16th.
Planning and zoning?
June 16th, we're meeting
That's
on
like a
June
month
9th.
away. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we could get them in here on June 2nd, y'all kind of punted past the first Monday we could possibly, get them. I'm writing a letter to the current planning and zoning board members, because they've not answered their phones or, responded to those emails, with the exception of Dr. Zeiser, to see if they're still committed to doing this, because our city planner, Ms. Fleet, is
Right.
telling us we need to be meeting monthly, so
Yeah.
I might be, you know, helping some people along and opening up some planning and zoning, seats for y'all to appoint new people to.
Well, there should
I
be
mean, if they
one
just
open.
won't communicate.
I mean, there should be one open since Councilman Knight got that forward. but
We filled that one. So
And-
we've got 5 people on it.
In the past, if we can't get a quorum, honestly, then you end up sitting in the place of the planning and zoning committee.
Oh, okay.
So we could call a meeting for June 2nd, if they don't show up, you guys should be there.
We do it at our council
I know
meeting.
Mr. Councilman Lewandowski won't be here, but we can.
Well,
Bradford, you know.
when is our next meeting? Was it the 9th?
June 9th.
That's right, because you had to be gone.
Right.
So, okay,
Councilman,
we could do that.
Lewandowski, you asked about Clay County. It doesn't look like Clay County actually has a separate mobile food.
It does, it's in here.
No, well, what they do is they wrap it into their event permit, so in their event permit, they have different requirements for if they're providing food.
Right, it does, it's not as clear cut, it's not as.
They just don't have it.
Yeah.
Okay, right here.
So if you look under their permit, event permit requirements, I mean, there's many pages.
Right.
They fold it into that. Based on the number of people that are in a certain area and things like that.
Do we need to make provision for any other kind of mobile facility? You know, a temporary food facility that's not on wheels?
Well, so
A
that's
tent
kind of why
or whatever.
That's a
we call it
cottage
mobile
industry.
food vending. Mobile food vending could be a hot dog cart. It's also anything that's not a permanent structure.
Okay, I guess,
And
at
there
least one
are-
of them that I read
they're all-
defined a thing on wheels and stuff.
That's why, because there's a different regulation. A cottage industry goes under a different, or it goes under agriculture. That is a tent that's set up in like, that's a lemonade stand, or they sell baked goods. Everything has to be labeled with all the ingredients. That's more of a cottage industry. It is under different regulations. So, and it has different rules. And they don't have necessarily a state licensure, but they have a state regulation.
Okay.
Mobile food trucks have state licensure along with regulations.
And we don't anticipate
We-
the cottage industry
No,
type of
that
thing
would
here.
pertain to this. This is a mobile vendor.
We haven't had somebody come ask us for permission on that yet.
Okay.
So,
And I've had it at Vince, but I don't have it necessarily in this situation. You're not looking for someone to sell baked goods at someone's, you know.
Well, we just did the spring fling up at the airport, which is city
Yes.
property, and there were food vendors there.
They were, and they all had the
That's
same,
different
yeah.
Well, they had both food trucks and food.
They had food trucks in the cottage, but they had,
But even though it's city-owned property,
right.
we have an interlocal agreement where the airport property is regulated by Bradford's planning and zoning.
But they also followed all the rules, like we did when I ran an event, they had applications and they had their liability insurance and they had their licensure. And if they were cottage, they did every single thing like it was an event.
The entirety of
Through
the
the
airport
city of
property?
Keystone Heights.
No, we didn't regulate that.
No, we did not regulate that.
Bradford County.
That Bradford
They
County
did all the
did.
paperwork
But
in
they did,
Bradford County.
I told them how we do it, so they honored all the same things when they did that, but they did it, regulation was in Bradford County. The Bradford County Fire Marshal came out, regulated the trucks, all of that. And that's kind of similar to what some of these application processes are. Like people would come to us and say, within the city limits, we wanna have it at this place. We would make sure they follow all the safety guidelines, we'd make sure they have all the regulations, we'd make sure that the people that they say they're gonna have it have approved it, we'll back do all that, and then they can have the event as many times as you allow them to.
Okay, so once a month, when we had the Wings of Dreams Museum up at the airport, the owner, the proprietor, Bob Ohl,
Yeah.
would host a fly-in. It was a morning pancake breakfast thing,
Right.
and people would fly in, and he would give breakfast. Did he do permit requests here
That's
or in
different,
Bradford
that's just
County?
like when Kiwanis sells theirs, it kind of falls under another guideline, it's just like when we do breakfast, we catered it in, for the veterans.
No, but this was open to the public.
Yes, I
Okay.
mean, we didn't take reservations for that either, and when Kiwanis does their cornhole tournament / fishing tournament, and they sold stuff, that falls under the guise of their special event requests. Within the city, for them, I don't know if they filled out a special event request or asked permission from the airport authority, but it falls under, I don't know backwards and forwards, the
I'm learning a
airport
ton of
authority.
stuff here.
So the spring thing.
I'm not well versed in airport authority.
Yeah, so the way the spring thing worked, I think, is it was put on, hosted by Friends of Keystone.
This,
Part of the centennial.
this particular one, yes.
Correct. And so they had people on the group there, board members, that worked with the airport in coordinating that whole thing.
Right, so.
Specifically through David Kirkland and whoever.
Right,
you
he
know,
was
he
also
reached-
on
had
Friends
them
of
reach out to.
Right,
to set
and they
all
also
that up.
worked with me, and then I shared with them how we organized everything, what they needed to have, they worked with the fire marshal. But that's totally a different kind of situation than what we're trying to accomplish today.
Yeah.
That's, it's apples and oranges. When we do an event with the city would, underneath the ordinance, I would coordinate that for the city.
Right.
None of this applies to that. The same permitting process can, I could have all my food vendors have the same permitting process with iWorks. It makes sense to do that, so that if they do wanna do an application to do something outside of an event at one of these, that I already have all the paperwork and it
Right, you're already in
streamlines
the
everything.
system.
It just makes sense to do that. But what we're looking for here is, one, are you wanting to adopt something along the lines of Green Coast Springs plan, so we can open up options for vendors in the city and for business, and for landowners and businesses to be able to have more options, so our community can have that. Start here, and then if we wanna add, we have the events that we have a lot more. We have the Fall Festival, the Christmas Market, the 4th of July, the Chautauqua, we did not have food trucks, we had food trucks, we did not have vendors for that, but they will grow, and our strategic plan says they will grow. We have options to possibly look at the natural park as a possibility in the future. We have options of doing more events or having food truck vendors come and do events somewhere else. We have those options. This is over and above, beyond that. This is opening up our community to have more options. And so the question is, do we want to do something like this, or do we want to sit there and spend more time figuring out where we're gonna host them, or where we're gonna allow them to go with the city, because that's a little bit more regulatory. If we say we're only gonna allow this area, this area, this area, and those are the city properties, that falls more under my coordination of an event, that's more things. But this allows for that to be taken away. We know everything's safe, we know the regulation, they have those options, and I can still do those other things.
Well, I mean, I'm in favor of updating it to meet some of the newer guidelines
Right.
and take away some of the restrictions that we currently have in place. I like the idea of having the different zone areas, so it's real black and white to the vendor. And already we talked about changing the internal process. That's
Right.
huge. I mean, that's really huge to me. And then once we get some of that sorted, then as soon as possible, we can look at where can they go if they're not gonna be at the parking lot.
Right, we don't have to determine that with this process, we
No,
only
I
have to
understand.
determine that if
It's
we're
separate.
gonna have a different process.
I understand that. And because if it's a business owner that brings it into their parking lot, then they have to go through the process like you just mentioned.
Right, or
But
then-
they already have the space. So what I'm talking to is space that we have when they come to us and say, we wanna be at your beach parking lot for the weekend.
Right.
We don't want them there anymore, so where is that new space? And then that's where we can take these guidelines and push it into a new design plan on whatever that's gonna be, or what we can be allowed to do, based on the requirements, traffic-wise, safety-wise, all those things are outlined in
Right.
the other ones.
Correct.
Should they come in requesting, to put their truck at the beach park? Or
Because
a
it's
specific place, or
They
do
only do that because we have the acre, Rich was saying, we
Oh,
have an
okay.
acre restriction, we
Okay.
had, this was the only place to do it. And because this was the only place to
So
do it.
there was no choice and so.
There was no
okay.
choice. Most of
Gotcha.
the places do not wanna come once a month.
Gotcha.
Chick-fil-A would like to come twice. Everybody would like to come more often.
Right.
There is a possibility for a food truck to say, I want to do 4 permits, I'm gonna be at, Ace Hardware one day, I'm gonna be over between Popeyes, and I'm gonna talk to that lane over between Popeyes and whatever's next to Popeyes, I just can't think right now, I'm gonna be at that lot one day, I'm gonna be at this lot one day, I'm gonna be over here one day. They could do more than, and still, there's options out there for someone to be here more often.
So they can incorporate
That's
that
just
into
inside
their
the 1.2,
plan,
and they
okay.
could go outside the county, and the rest of the Clay County and fall under those as well.
A lot of the, I think, 2 or 3 of the ones that I reviewed required the vendor to come in with a detailed 2-scale drawing of what they're gonna do.
A
with
site
their-
map, yeah.
Where people, can come and go, and that, is that necessary in this?
I would think that it would be necessary to be able to have with documentation, the original documentation, to make sure that they're not going over culverts and they're not on septic tanks, that they're not blocking line of view. And that also gives documentation that if the city manager, you say the city manager has a right to revoke, that if they're breaking that continuously, that's documentation to say, this is what we've agreed upon, this is what you're doing. So I think, yes, the original documentation, not necessarily every single time.
Would it make sense for us to make available to them a drawing of the locations where we're gonna allow them to be?
Well,
The beach park.
from what the
or
mayor's
whatever.
wanting to do, this that I was proposing allows, they have to go out there and determine that, and then we determine if it fits within the ordinance. They determine where their location is as vendor, or the business owner determines how many food trucks they want on the property. And then we check to make sure it fits the ordinances, they have all their licensure, everything's covered, and then they
Understand,
determine.
yeah, I was just
The
thinking
other thing, the
some
other
portion
side
of-
thing is that we could determine that if they came to us and said, hey, listen, we don't wanna go to other businesses, we like these other things, they come to us as a business, that could be something that we could look at, say, these are the designated areas that we are allowed, that the city council approves for. And it makes sense that a lot of those are the parks.
Okay, maybe I'm getting too far in the weeds.
And I don't think so.
I was just.
I think that there's 2 things we're talking about. I think this is one thing, and then using our parks as another, and both intertwine in the fact that when you're writing an ordinance, you wanna say, you don't wanna say 1 acre if you wanna use a park that's smaller. Or a parking lot after hours next to an insurance company that's open then, and that business is, this allows that business to say that parking lot can be used for a food truck, there's other parking there, it doesn't impede anything, we can do it after hours, and that can produce one more thing that can come to the city at night, as long as it's 50, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, and it takes away the burden on us to figure out right now where we're gonna put every food truck. But it gives us the ability to continue to do that, and only exponentially grow the opportunities.
So from your experience, just thinking about your being the vendor,
Right.
how do you think the best way for us to embrace them as business partners?
Giving them as many
Process audits.
options, giving them a clear cut understanding, a simple procedure, being able to come in here, do an application, have a reasonable turnaround with clear cut understanding of what's going on, that it's equal for every single person.
Right.
Now, can everybody use the same parking lot at the same time? No, but it's taking it out of us, like Rich said, we are not choosing somebody, we're not picking you over so and so. There is a little bit of a business plan that has to be done on their behalf. It puts the burden on the applicant, either the business owner or the vendor. It puts the burden on them. The renewal is put on them. If they don't do it within that year, it's not on us. But if they do it within the year's period of time by the deadline, then they pay less because it's less work on us. It streamlines it because we can have it through iWork and we can pull up their permit and say, yes, they're good, or hey, listen, this seems to be a little bit of a code violation here. And it takes less man hours from our part.
So Madam Mayor, Ms. Bell, if I could take an attempt at kind of landing the plane after, if I could take an attempt at kind of coming in for a final approach and landing, just listening to you guys, I think you generally want this process to keep going. I haven't heard anybody absolutely object to the Green Cove model. I've heard Councilman Lewandowski say he wants to make sure that the Clay County ordinances are not discounted in some way,
Just so we're not-
acknowledged in the process. Could we, take the guidance we've gotten from you guys in the discussion tonight, have Ms. Bell massage the Green Cove to something that we think would fit Keystone? We'll make every attempt to have a planning and zoning meeting on June 2nd, the first Monday of June, and get those people in here and put something that we think, based off your guidance and Green Cove's template, works for Keystone. And then hopefully by June 9th, we'll at least have, Rich, you might have to throw me a lifeline here. Could we advertise the first reading on June 9th, and then if we don't get there from here, then I just have to fall on my sword and tell you we're not quite ready, but could we attempt to have the first reading on June 9th?
We can, but here, let me throw another argument. So, we're talking about streamlining processes for the permit application. You're talking about trying to get this in place as quickly as possible as we're coming into the summer months. You've given a lot of good feedback to Drew. Why don't you let Drew and I just draft something and bring it back to you? We'll just skip the P and Z for right now.
Skip the what?
Skip planning and zoning.
Thank you.
And I'm okay with an imperfect product. We'll try some stuff.
You can
We're
always
pretty
change it.
good.
Right, we can change it again later.
It's gonna be way better when we got our hand.
Right, because there are some more two homework things I'd like to ask, but they do not need to be incorporated to this. But they could prove very beneficial. And the first is on Highway 21, what are the FDOT rules about food trucks? Because I think of my visits, to Washington DC, and there along the mall, lined up in front of all the Smithsonians, is food truck after food truck after food truck after food truck. And right on a major thoroughway.
Yeah, we can't do that.
So just could you check?
But I could get that
Check
for
what
you.
the rules are.
Yeah.
You know,
pretty sure
because
it's
if
like
on
that.
a Sunday, when many of our restaurants are closed, we lined up 4 food trucks or whatever right there on 21, you know, and as long as you put the front of it on the sidewalk side,
Right.
then potentially.
I hear you, that also limits parking, I think that's okay. But
Just-
I'll get it for you
just-
so we can make a
just-
decision.
I'm curious. And then a dream of mine, and again, this is from another location, I'm really stealing ideas. I'm
The
not
best
really-
ones come from somebody else.
Well, I've seen this work really well. We have in our strategic plan stated that trails are important. And so one of the major trails running through the city, of course, is Rails to Trails. And what I've seen before is trucks and food vendors along the trail.
So you want to find the regulations for
And
that?
they are, right, they are only open on weekends. And let me tell you, does it draw the people? Bicyclists and walkers, and they all say, we're gonna go to Keystone Heights and we're gonna get an ice cream on the trail. You know, they park half a mile away because they wanna go for a walk and then get their ice cream and move on.
I'll look into that to see what
So, yeah, what are the
regulations
rules?
I think that's what the mayor is trying to describe, is a designated place for them.
Right, and
And
we
that
I
might
like-
be,
I like that.
that might be a great place.
Yeah, cause it's away from the.
Just be careful that
Big food
there's
businesses.
a lot of environmental people that don't want trucks parking along the trails.
Right.
I understand.
I think I like the idea of just
Yeah,
saying
like, because it's already paved.
there's
and
gotta be a
nice.
balance.
Yeah,
in-
Well, I'm not advertising or advocating for permanent structures,
yeah.
but, you
Even
know,
if it's
they
once
need
or
to
twice a
drink the
month.
water, and they're gonna have to go somewhere, and if we do go through with phase 3 of the Rails to Trails Park, we're gonna put bathrooms there, and so we're kinda set up for it.
No, I mean, that can fall under a couple of different guys, yeah.
So again, not this go around,
No,
but homework to look at what our options are in the future.
Fair
That's
enough.
allowed.
Well, let's get something started. I mean,
Yeah.
you want to amend the ordinance, so we'll take our current ordinance and
I like that
Drew
plan.
and I can talk about, and we'll have something back to you. We can advertise, it can be on the agenda as a public hearing. Doesn't have to be, we actually do the 10-day advertisement generally before the final, because if there's a substantial change that city manager and I talked about earlier, we'd have to redo the first tier. So usually you don't wanna spend the money to do your 10-day advertisement on the first tier.
Sounds like a plan. Do you have any other input?
No.
Good. All right.
Just curious, I wasn't clear, I was not able to decode what you were telling Councilman Lewandowski in response to his question about Highway 21.
So I will look that up to
As far as
see what the Florida DOT's restrictions are
Okay, thank you, on the state road.
on the state roads, particularly and specifically inside the city limits area.
Thank you,
And then I will also
misunderstood
look
you.
at the rails to trails. I will look at the regulations for being able to have food trucks along that area. And I think that probably is gonna determine on what the front edge of rails to trails, how deep that is, what property is next to it, so forth and so
Oh,
on.
yeah, okay, thank you, I misunderstood you
No,
right
that's
there, so I
fine.
thought you were saying Highway 21 was not an option.
I
You're
feel
saying-
is that it's personally, I think it was great on doing the boulevard when we closed the road down. I think that there might be a possibility, especially since where they most likely would get the most business is close up to that intersection, and we already have a problem with parking, and we already have a problem with visual, but we can find out the things so we can make decisions.
But you just hit on where I'm going with this.
Right.
And that is when we close it down already for a major event like Blue on the Boulevard, and we don't allow people to park there anyway, why can't we have food trucks there?
Well, yes, I'll find out, and then you can make that determination later.
And really, this application, I mean, I think it looks it's real simple. Is that something they can do online, or does it have to be in person?
So all of our applications, for the most part, when it comes to permitting, are on the website.
Okay.
And then my understanding, I think it's still this case, Bo, are the applications linked to iWork so they can actually autofill them on the website still?
We could do that,
Yeah, we can make that
I'm
happen.
just thinking about
So they
the
autofill it,
convenience of it.
and then it goes into iWork, and then it would go to either emailing that straight to the person that's going to be handling that. And so there's a couple of different ways that can happen. So
Great. Excellent.
it'll definitely streamline it. And then we can pull reports and be able to see how many food trucks we have, and we'll be able to pull data and so forth and so on, which is nice.
Can I ask a completely off the mark question?
Yes.
The parade, the 4th of July parade?
Yes.
When is the last day that someone can make an application to be in the parade?
I have no idea, but I can go look in just a second. You want me to go right now? I have no other
You can let
questions.
me know after the meeting.
Okay. It's just right in there. I don't know that one particular fact off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I
Well,
can-
I got a family
Are you,
relative.
are you wanting an application?
No, a family relative just asked me that question
Okay.
last night, and I'm like, I have no idea.
Fair enough, fair enough. And I just asked, recently to make sure all those applications are on the 4th of July. I'm updating all the different flyers and all the different events and applications and so forth and so on.
One more question about food truck placement.
Yes.
As I interpret this, a property owner can permit a food truck to park on their property.
So yes, if a owner wanted to have a private event, they cannot, a person, a resident in the community, Councilman Lewandowski cannot park a food truck at the corner of his property and sell food to, and have them sell food to individuals. But if he wants to have a party, he can have
Well,
one.
given the limited parking and we're talking about most of the attractions are gonna be down in this area, I was wondering if it might be permissible with the owner's permission.
Well, no.
Because there are some fairly substantial yards along Lakeview, for example.
Right, that could be a possibility to look at for an ordinance. I'm not
Park there,
100%
back from
sure
the
of that.
sidewalk, and
I don't know if that's a zoning issue. Rich, what do you say? A residential using it as on a day of an event for them to be able to pull a permit saying that they can have something
Under the current code or proposed code?
proposed.
I think you could.
Yeah,
And to me, that has some appeal, just from the standpoint
Like a
of
one-time permit.
not taking up parking space along the street or the parking lots.
right,
And people can wander up and down and look at the art and do whatever they wanna do.
right. I think we have a pretty big park as it is, and I think we can grow it bigger and bigger. I think as it expands, then that might be more plausible.
Okay.
I'd like to see this so packed that we do pour out, but I don't know. I mean,
So-
I've seen it in other cities like Mount Dora. Land property owners, individual residents, that booths start spilling over into residential areas. and
So I like
parks.
where you're going, Dave, with this for two reasons. One is, it's really hard to shut down Lawrence because it's a, state road. And have a street art show or something like that. We can't do that a lot if we limit ourselves just to South Lawrence.
And there's a safety thing with the, traffic
Yes,
along.
it is much easier to shut down Lakeview. And that's right where the park is.
Yeah.
And I relate this to a place where I used to live, where they would do this all the time. They would shut down an entire street, 2 blocks or 3 blocks. They would, get the barricades up, shut it up, and then the people would bring out their tables, and it was a huge, what is it, when everybody
Block
brings a
party.
dish? It was called a block party, but it was, everyone brought a dish and shared it, and then potluck, that's what I'm looking for. It was a potluck,
Neighborhood day.
a neighborhood potluck, and they'd have loudspeakers playing music, and the kids would be running all over the street on their skateboards and their roller skates, and it was a block party.
Yeah.
And it was a yearly thing. They do it once a year on this block, and then over at that block, and that kind of thing. So doing something like that on Lakeview, if the residents are interested,
Mhm.
you don't want to force anything on them.
Sure.
But any other block, okay, how do we let the food trucks
If
be
you
part
could
of
shut
that?
down the street, they wouldn't need the yard, they could just park along the side.
They could.
Yeah, but just be careful, like,
Yeah.
you can't really start putting food trucks in residential areas. Cause then your neighbors are gonna, I promise you, complain.
Yeah.
They live in a residential area, it's not supposed to be commercial.
Right.
There's already problems with people that are having wedding venues in residential areas, so.
Yeah.
What I was speaking of is more of a special event situation.
Yeah.
Right,
We
this
do
would be a
that.
special event once a year.
Like around the park area, I think you'll be okay, but.
We have closed down Lakeview when we do on 4th of July from this curve here over.
Yeah, from
and
Palmetto.
And we allow only handicap parking here.
Yeah.
Well, when they do the strip festival in Fernandina, they do kind of that, where they go down side roads and
Bingo.
Mount
have
Dora
tables
does
set
it,
up. and
makes
they
every
have-
road one way. It's
And
half
the
a
park is
road.
getting ready to do the crab festival this coming
Yes, ma'am.
weekend, so
And they close
Yeah.
down.
I'll kind of take notice of
They
theirs.
They close down a lot, but they keep residential open.
Right. So you have to be able to have a path to go around, but there are options, all those options are definitely.
I just wanted to say,
Yes.
I like what you're thinking,
Unfettered.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that we can share ideas like this.
Yeah.
Most of them probably won't work out, but you never know. One or
You
two
never
of them
know what you
might.
might find outside the box.
Yeah, exactly.
So just as a recap, Rich and I are gonna get together and we are going to come up with a ordinance that we feel that we can give to you guys on around June 9th. We're gonna advertise it prior to that, correct?
You just have to put it on the agenda. for
Like,
June.
on the agenda, that's the
And
advertisement,
then-
because we're not gonna
No,
make it
that's
a
not the
draft.
advertisement.
Yeah.
The advertisement's the 10-day that goes before final adoption.
Gotcha. So we're gonna do that. I have 2 homework assignments at DOT, food trucks on 21, and then also on the Rails to Trails, or any trails going through the city, if we have food trucks there, what the regulations are. And that concludes it, right? For now?
I think that's it. Anything else?
Thank you for your work.
Yeah, well, thanks for everyone.
No problem.
I appreciate it.
It's been a long time coming, so thanks for being so helpful and guiding us.
Anything else? Charlie, Rich? No?
Thank you very much, Drew. She begged for a chance to rewrite an ordinance. It's one of the few things she hadn't done.
Okay.
Might be stretching the truth.
I see his nose is growing longer.
No, but I am very excited about being able to have a plan that is in place and that we can move forward.
To make